This is Meredith for Real, the Curious Introvert, and I'm Meredith. Around here, we explore taboo questions and societal blind spots. Each high-contrast guest gives you the layered deep dive you crave, not just the Google results making headlines. My mission, and yours if you choose to accept it, is to inspire curiosity by exploring the nuance and paradox of our world. Each episode is different, so bring your ADD and your earbuds and have a look around. This episode asks a question anyone who has ever scrolled social media has asked. Is narcissism on the rise? My guest addresses this and specifically the role that social media plays. She covers the question of, is narcissism bad brain wiring or is it a trauma response? She also has some practical tips on how to prevent narcissistic behavior within ourselves. This was an episode that includes some feedback that you gave me. That is, if you are in my private Facebook group. But fear not, if you're not in there, you're officially invited. I do post things in there that I don't post anywhere else, and I do occasional giveaways. You can search MFR Curious Insiders on Facebook or click the link in the episode description. I hope to see you in there. Lastly, if you end up liking this episode, you'll also like the one I did with the cultural anthropologist questioning American individualism. You'll hear me reference this episode in my conversation with Dr. Sarkis. That episode is episode 260. All right, friends, keep it curious. In addition to finding the best Chinese food in town, Google tracks the popularity of words. And it turns out the use of the word narcissism has been growing every year. Our interest in narcissists seems to rise with every true crime podcast, but has the prevalence of actual narcissism risen along with it? My next guest is a psychotherapist with over 20 years of experience specializing in ADHD, anxiety, and narcissistic abuse. She's a contributor to Forbes and Psychology Today and the author of Healing from Toxic Relationships, 10 Essential Steps to Recover from Gaslighting, Narcissism, and Emotional Abuse. Today, she's going to combine her vast education and experience to take a closer look at what narcissism is and isn't as we ask the question, is narcissism on the rise? Clinical insights and practical strategies, more degrees than a thermometer, author, educator, and fellow podcaster, Dr. Stephanie Moulton Sarkis. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I like that. More degrees than a thermometer. I haven't heard that one before. I like it.
It's definitely true about you. You have so many degrees. It was hard not to put everything in the intro. I just want people to know you are like locked and loaded, qualified, and ready to discuss this topic in any form or fashion.
Because more degrees than a thermometer. I really like that. I think I'm going to introduce myself like that to people.
You should.
That doesn't sound terrible or anything, right?
No, not at all. I think your next TEDx talk, like that's what you should definitely do. So. I want to get into the difference between narcissistic personality disorder and narcissistic personality traits in a minute. So for, listeners that are, on the edge of their seat waiting, that's coming soon. But first, I want to ask you if you feel like people with NPD are born with it or if it's a response to trauma or parenting.
Great question. It's both. We don't always know with nature and nurture exactly which way stuff leans, right? With anything. And we also need more research. So one of the issues is that you don't see a lot of research on people with NPD or narcissistic personality disorder, because people with narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, have what's called egocentric personality, which means they think that everyone else has a problem, they don't. So the chances of someone seeing a study that says we're studying narcissism and that person going, oh, identify with that, is pretty low. So the studies you see are usually where they look at a population of people that just a slice of life population, and they do studies to see, does this person qualify for NPD? That's what we look at. So we need more research studies around. So what we do find is that people that have narcissism and sociopathy, or what's also called antisocial personality disorder, they tend to get a dopamine or serotonin boost. Those are neurotransmitters, feel-good neurotransmitters. They get those from manipulating and gaining control over people. Most people get dopamine, serotonin boost from playing with your cat or dog, playing with your kids, doing a good job at work. So it's a different way that the brain works. And also you're learning from your parents how to behave. kids watch their parents like hawks. So you're going to have people that behave in a dysfunctional way. And sometimes people learn those behaviors. They think that's how you interact with the world. Or they learn that you need to manipulate people to get what you need to survive because you had a parent that just didn't provide for you, nurturing, even food and shelter. So you have people that learn these behaviors and they realize later in life, maybe a partner tells them or a friend tells them, hey, the way you're doing stuff, it's not working for me. And I think you need to get help. So I have had people call me and tell me, hey, I think I'm gaslighting people. I think I'm a narcissist. I think I need help. And many times it's that they learn those behaviors from their parents. So it's a little mix of both.
So if someone calls you and says, hey, I think I'm a narcissist and I need help, can they be helped?
I think so. I wouldn't go into the field I'm in if I didn't think people had the ability to change. So
Okay,
when
that's
someone
true.
calls me, usually that already tells me that there's an incentive to improve. And also I take a look at the fact that so many times when you're in a narcissistic relationship, you have a narcissistic family member, one of the things they do is project and tell you that you're the narcissist. So I have had people come in, they tell me, I think I'm a narcissist, my spouse, partner, my parents told me I'm a narcissist. Well, it turns out no. First of all, the chances of you coming in saying you're a narcissist and you actually qualify for NPD are pretty low. But also sometimes it's that you're with somebody who has narcissistic traits and they're projecting that onto you and calling you a narcissist, or it turns out you're really not.
Should you tell someone that they are a narcissist?
I really don't recommend that because unless that person's been diagnosed by somebody, we really don't know. So that's why I'm probably going to lean towards talking about more narcissistic traits of people. So it also backfires because you will have someone that will use that against you. So when you are with some of the narcissistic traits or NPD, they will take whatever you say and flip it on you. And there's this thing called DARVO, DARVO. It's an acronym that says deny, accuse, and reverse victim and offender. And what I mean by that is if you say, you know what, you've been calling me names, you're a narcissist, they'll immediately flip it on you and go, oh no, you're the narcissist. And they'll pull up all this information that they claim that you've done that means you're a narcissist. And very quickly they will turn it into them being the victim and you being the perpetrator. So I really don't recommend telling people that because it does not end well for people.
There's so much there. Okay, this reminds me of one of my Facebook insiders' questions. They asked about persecution complex. Is that related to what you were just describing? Because I've never heard of this before.
That's not necessarily the DSM or diagnostic manual, but persecution complex, when we're looking at things like covert narcissism. So if you look at overt versus covert narcissism, overt narcissism is the one that we generally recognize, which is somebody being really loud, wanting attention, wanting to be treated specially. I don't know if that's good grammar. We'll just go with that. Then you have the covert narcissism, which is someone that's kind of aw shucks. They'll make self-deprecating jokes. They will portray themselves as a victim, but as soon as you set a boundary, say no to that person, they can react with narcissistic rage, or they can stonewall you, which means they act like you don't even exist.
Ooh, okay. So could our uptick societally in children cutting their parents off, stonewalling, be attributed to rising rates of narcissism?
I think that's always been present, and that the rates of narcissism really haven't changed, but I think we're getting better at identifying it. And I think also society-wise, we're giving people more and more permission to detach from people that are not healthy for them. That's been a shift. I know sometimes when people that I work with have decided to go no contact, that's a decision that's not made lightly. That takes a lot of thought, a lot of grief for people. But I'm noticing that the rates of family and friends saying, honor thy mother and father, blood's thicker than water, trying to guilt people into keeping those connections, I've seen that actually decrease over time. I think we're, as a society, giving people permission to what's best for them. And sometimes the best thing to do is to not have that presence in your life.
That's interesting. Okay, so what is the difference between NPD and narcissistic traits?
So we have this continuum. So we have traits, which We all have traits of anxiety, depression, probably narcissistic behavior sometimes. But when you have a predominance of symptoms and it impacts your functioning, so you're not able to go about your life in the way that one would think you would be able to go through your life as, that's when you reach the diagnostic phase. So that means you have significant impairment from these symptoms. And also the DSM gives a cluster of symptoms that you have to meet to be diagnosed. So again, there's a continuum. And when we look at the end of the continuum, the diagnosis, we're only talking about like 2 to 4% of the US population, if that. And then for traits, that could be, again, we could all have at the other end of the spectrum, we could just have traits. Sometimes we just don't feel like following other people's rules. And then we have the middle ground, which is where, well, now we're getting into maybe some predominant behaviors, and then we get towards the end of the spectrum. So it really depends on where that person falls. But I think the most important thing is, how does this person make you feel? Not so much do they have this or not, but do you leave conversation with them feeling more confused than you were before? Do you feel like being around them drains you rather than gives you energy? How does this person impact your life? I think that's what we need to look at. We need to put the focus on ourselves rather than the person that we think might be narcissistic, because that's a very common thing we do. We put the focus on the person with narcissism because they kind of demand that. But again, it's really important to look at, how does this person make me feel?
Couldn't that within itself, that process you just described, cause us to slip into traits of narcissism?
Explain more about that.
Like if we are measuring everything around us by how we feel, isn't that a narcissistic process within itself?
I don't think so, because it's the intent behind it. Because we need to respect our boundaries. We need to respect that we need to come first in our lives. There's a difference between, I need to put myself as a priority. I need to put my mental health as a priority. There's a difference between that and then saying, you know what, I come first. I don't care what anybody wants. I'm going to hurt them to get what I need. There's a difference between that and practicing good self-care, like setting boundaries and doing some introspective work. There's a big difference.
So how would you describe narcissism outside of that healthy end of the spectrum? What traits are we talking about? Or what presentation of traits?
You can have a narcissistic rage, again, where you get so angry, it's like the person's not even there anymore, and they may devolve into talking about things that really don't even make sense anymore. You will visibly sometimes see their face change into total anger. You can also have people that believe that they should have special privileges or rights over other people. People with NPD can have a narcissistic void, which means that they have this bottomless pit of need. And no matter how many people they get validation from, it's still never enough. And also you can have people that get narcissistic injuries. If you call someone out on their behavior and you say, hey, the way you talk to me is not okay, and they've gotten a narcissistic injury, you've hit their ego because their ego is so large, then you get into the narcissistic rage behavior.
I mean, from what you're describing, even so, let's say those are traits and not full NPD. That does seem to describe a lot of the presenting we see on social media. It's hard for me to believe that it's not on the rise. How do we measure rates of narcissism throughout the decades? So, in other words, how can we be sure that these sort of personality tendencies, aside from like diagnostic narcissism, is not like on the uptick?
Well, we do have narcissism scales. So we do have assessment scales like the MMPI. We have the Narcissistic Personality Inventory that can give an idea of the extent of narcissism. So those have been used currently and in the past. So we have research based on those. But also when you look at research when people have signs of it, it's a little trickier, and research has its benefits and also its drawbacks. So overall, in some studies, they've shown a correlation between narcissistic traits and social media, but let's keep in mind that correlation is not equal causation. Just because A and B are related doesn't mean A caused B.
It just could mean that it's more on display because it's social media.
It could be that's more on display because of social media. So now you're seeing it globally rather than just, somebody down your street. Yeah.
Right. Although definitely the ecosystem of social media seems to encourage and reward, if you will, people's display of self.
Oh, it absolutely rewards. It pays people for it, right?
Literally.
So, yeah.
In your practice, has social media use been a dynamic that has to be discussed within itself with patients who are struggling with narcissistic personality traits?
I actually don't see that as much of an issue. In fact, I see people that they feel like they need to be on social media, but they really rather not, which that might be the population I work with. It might be different for another therapist, but I actually don't see people struggling with the fact that they are posting too much on social media. It's actually the opposite.
And how does the social media play into like diagnosing self or diagnosing others when it comes to narcissism? Because we hear that word, thrown around quite a bit. And definitely I've heard it more just pop up in social media. Obviously, Google's tracking these word searches and it's becoming more popular in the big scope of things. Is that sort of like trying to diagnose self or other people been a help or a hinder when it comes to staying in that healthy zone?
Well, first, I'm just happy that people are talking about mental health issues in more public space because I think that we had not had that outlet for a long time and there's still a lot of stigma with it. But people have asked me, how do I feel about people talking about gaslighting and toxic relationships, and maybe they don't always have the definitions right. Again, I'm just glad people are talking about it, and it's something that's becoming socially acceptable to discuss. I think that's the most important thing. So social media, just like everything else in life, isn't all bad. There's some good stuff to it too. And I have had people contact me and they say, hey, I saw this thing on TikTok or saw this thing on YouTube, and I'm pretty sure that I'm experiencing gaslighting. So it's helped a lot of people. And yeah, sometimes do the definitions we're not really sure, exactly, and people are interpreting through the lens of whoever they are and what their experience has been, sure. But again, there are a lot of people that are learning more about it, and I think that's wonderful.
I interviewed this one researcher who he was so interesting. We actually talked about, is American individualism overrated? Part of that discussion came up his experience living in India. He also is someone with autism. And so his social experience was real, and his perspective through that was really unique. And something he said was, in his experience in India, one person's decisions, it was more known that one person's decisions would affect everyone's life. And so your sense of self was connected with your community, as opposed to the US, where you can make decisions just for whatever you want to do and not consider your family and not consider your friends. He used the example of starting a business. He's like, well, if you start a business and it fails, then financially, who is impacted by that? He had all these different ways of thinking. And so that got me wondering, for the topic of narcissism, do you think American individualism contributes to narcissism?
Well, first, I'll just say in my practice, I've seen narcissism in collectivistic cultures as well. We have an individualistic culture like you just described and collectivist culture. Narcissism can be present in both. The flip side of that I've seen is that I've worked with people that because of the family structure and collectivistic culture, you are expected to take care of your parent when they're older.
Right.
And that can create a big issue when you have someone that has experienced abuse, pretty severe abuse, and they still are expected by the family to take care of their parent. And if you tell someone for individualistic predominant culture, it's okay, you don't have to take care of your parent, you're not obligated to. It doesn't have the same weight as when you tell someone from a collectivistic culture that they don't have to do that, because it very may well be that they feel that they have to. But I don't think either culture kind of type wins as far as, less or more narcissism.
I've heard it said that the history books are only written by narcissistic people. And there's definitely a tie there between, our American individualistic leanings and history. Like, we read about great men, usually it's guys, like, oh, this great man, he did this one thing. And so then there's that striving to be that one great person instead of being like, oh, let's become this great community. I don't know. Do you think there's any truth to the fact that the history books are written by narcissists about narcissists?
Well, I think we have to be really careful about that because there are many historians that have strived to not do that. So I do want to give credit to the historical community for that. But I think also we need to look at the fact that a lot of dictatorships run by narcissists tend to ultimately fail. And there are a couple different reasons for that. There's a really good article I cannot remember the author's name, where he talks about the different things that eventually topple a dictatorship. So we also have to look at, too, that there have been some narcissists that didn't get on the winning side. And so I think that, we have to look at things through a critical lens when we read historical documents, historic interpretations, but we also need to look at the fact that there are narcissists that eventually they trip themselves up, and whatever they've got going, whether it's on a global scale or individual scale, usually falls apart.
That's interesting. I want to go back to your definition of that middle grade narcissism and the topic of social media, because I heard narcissism described as lack of empathy, which you described sociopaths, they struggle with that, entitlement, grandiose fantasies, some superficiality, lack of emotional regulation. You talked about the narcissistic rage. But when I first read that, it made me, and I know I'm being mean right now to social media influencers, but that description made me think of the stereotype of social media influencers: superficial, crying on camera, lack of emotional regulation, grandiose fantasies. Am I just being a little too harsh on that?
Well,
or
I
is
think
there
if
some
we
truth?
think it again, this is the social norm now. And people are sometimes playing a role.
Oh.
And again, that role has become their business. It's become their primary source of income. Are there people in any profession that narcissistic traits and or NPD? Sure. So I think it has to do more with what is it about social media that has created what you're speaking of? What is it about that platform that may have drawn people to it that maybe don't have the healthiest traits? There's also many healthy people that are doing social media stuff. But I think the ones that appear unhealthy to people, like you mentioned, I think that they are more obvious to people. There's someone on YouTube that talks about history stuff, and he seems like a pretty okay guy. Don't know him in person, but there's a lot of people just imparting information to people. So I think, again, we're looking at a percentage of the entire group, and we need to be careful to not depict everybody by that same lens. Again, does it attract people that may lack empathy and may have a self-focus? Sure. A lot of other things do too. So I think it's something we need to look at. Again, if we are watching the content, we're giving the person a payoff. They're getting paid for doing that. So we need to be pretty careful about where we're going to take our time and attention and what we're going to put our focus towards. If there's a particular influencer that you find is off-putting or may have narcissistic traits, don't watch it. Don't give them the views. That's a pretty simple way that we can stop it. Or if you see content that you feel is abusive or racist or otherwise offensive, report it. And I know that the different platforms have different rules about how quickly or if they'll take it down at all. But that's also our responsibility too, right? Is to report if we see something that is not okay.
Well, you bring up a really good point about the environment of social media influencers attracting people who maybe are a little bit stronger in the narcissistic scale. What are the other professions that tend to do that?
Again, I haven't seen more than maybe one study on that, but other professions that are thought to have higher percentages, when you look at what's called the dark triad, which is narcissism, Machiavellianism, and sociopathy. So Machiavellianism is that power-hungry stuff. When you look at that dark triad, the professions that tend to have a higher percentage of that, and again, I'm not speaking for everybody in that profession. This is just this population. Surgeons, and I probably need knee surgery, so I want to be really careful when I say that. For me, it's like, nope, not surgeons at all. Also, look at executives, like in the corporate suite. There's a higher percentage. But again, when we look at that, we also need to look at the fact that you may get promoted based on your narcissistic behavior because you know how to manipulate people, but you also get to a point where you no longer can fool people. And so you may have the board of directors vote you out because they realize that what you're doing is not good for the company. And when this type of person is given an option of retire or be fired, they will metaphorically burn everything down to the ground on the way out. They will try to decimate the company. So it's something that board of directors need to be on the watch for. If you see someone that exhibits these behaviors, you got to face it right away instead of enabling it, because they will destroy your company and they will lock people in endless lawsuits.
How do you face it right away if you can't call out their behavior, because you said you shouldn't confront a narcissist?
So when you meet with a board of directors and you say, here's some behavior that's been reported. Hey, HR said that this person has done X, Y, and Z. Instead of sweeping it under the carpet, you need to address it. And I think the #MeToo movement has changed some of that the complaints about sexual harassment and other types of harassment are being taken more seriously. I don't know how things are shifting now with the new administration, but they have been taken more seriously. So when you have documentation showing that someone has behaved in a way that's abhorrent, board of directors, managers, supervisors can do something about it. When you have people reporting something, you need to take it seriously, because if it's not, you're going to have less people reporting because they figure, well, they didn't take this person's report seriously. Now my job's on the line.
I had another listener in my private Facebook group ask, my second husband was a narcissist and he was also in law enforcement. How common is that? And would that make him a better or a worse cop?
I would say that narcissism overall, with lack of empathy, probably, in any profession, lack of empathy is not great. So I don't know any statistics on that, but I think especially when you have a profession where you are working with people that are vulnerable, I think it's really important that we look out for potential issues with people and their personalities and behavior, because having a lack of empathy is much more impactful in some professions than others.
Can narcissistic traits be screened for before hiring someone?
It really depends on the laws of the state as to what extent you can test people, but there are some psychological tests I've seen that people have done before hiring someone. And again, that gets in the legal part of things, and it really differs by jurisdiction.
When it comes to politics, someone asked, are politicians always narcissists? And I think why they were asking that is because the tribalism that's kind of happened, the divide in our country of being very all on this side or all on that side, and the social pressure to affiliate 100% with one side or the other side is one fueled by self-preservation a little bit, right? Because you don't want to be caught without a drive.
Well, you get punished. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think that narcissism is a necessary part of politics?
I would recommend that people watch a movie with Jimmy Stewart called Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I think it's a really good depiction of someone that goes into politics with the people's well-being being forefront of their mind and what happens over time. Another really good movie with Andy Griffith is Face in the Crowd. I think that's a really good look at people may not start out with this type of viewpoint, but over time it can happen. So is the person born with MPD and they're drawn to politics? I don't know. But I think we also need to look at different things that were done to purposely divide us.
Yeah.
And social media is a part of that, a huge part of it. We already have evidence that, we had people and, like, for instance, the Russian government pitting people against each other. And it's been very effective. So I think we need to look at more as what got us divided in the first place.
That's tricky.
And also narcissists operate in extremes. So always, never. And I know the person asked the question said always. I'm not talking about the person that asked the question. So I clarify. But you'll see that sometimes people that have a lack of empathy, people that have that power hungry kind of drive, sometimes are drawn to extremism.
Interesting. Yeah, I could see that, because if you have very punchy, controversial statements that you're able to make with a lot of confidence, you're getting a lot of attention, and you are attracting people who are extremely passionate also about whatever it is that you're saying. You're not going to gather a group of level-headed, middle of the road, tethered individuals. You're going to gather those that are increasingly enthusiastic, increasingly passionate. And, along with that probably comes donations, financial contributions, etc.
Right. And then also, again, we look at social media, we're, into these shorts, right? Where it's just a blip of information. So people try to get as many sound bites as they can get. So again, there's feedback you get from being as extreme as possible. There's the rage baiting, right? Where people just will say really out there things just to draw the attention in.
Yeah. And there's strategies in social media to say things that are wrong in order to, like, I've never heard the term rage bait, but I love it. But I think there's a temptation for people to think that's not real, that's not happening. It is 100% written strategy. Like, people will say, even just like spell a word wrong or give a fact that's completely incorrect, and it will blow your count up,
It's
and
engagement.
it's engagement. Yeah, absolutely. And that just seems so icky to me. I don't know.
So again, that's where we get into what can we do as consumers? And part of it is like, I don't use the YouTube app anymore. I go through my browser and I have added on extension on my phone that will block out any of the shorts. It blocks out any recommended videos. So there are things we can do to not engage with that.
What app is that?
So I can't think of the name of it, but I have an Apple. And they also have a thing on Reddit too, and under the Apple subreddit. It's free, and you can pick what you want it to block. And so it's very hard to block shorts on the YouTube app. So I decided I'm not going to use the app anymore. So the way we can speak out about that is by being vocal about it, and also by being very specific with how we engage with things. There are some social media apps I've just unloaded and I don't go to anymore because of that push of that rage baiting stuff. And, I'd like to keep things pretty less ragey in my life, right? So I make sure that I don't have access to that stuff, because you'll be fed it due to the algorithm. So, now when I go onto YouTube, I type in, I want to see videos of dogs on trampolines or whatever it is. I don't know where I came up with that. It sounds pretty fun. And I will only get that, and it will not recommend any other videos to me. And I no longer get ads too. So if you just go to the App Store on whether you have Android or Apple and just look up YouTube blocker or something along those lines, it'll minimize that for you. So a lot of it is how we behave around social media too. And then it's really easy to get sucked in, like with shorts. The reason why they're so effective is they give us a little blip of information, and then they move us on along to something else we'd like. And the next second we spent, an hour watching videos of water towers falling, which is actually something that was recommended to me. And I watched a water tower falling for 7 minutes. So they know who you are, and they know the algorithm knows you. And I have no idea how they pin me for water tower falling. And I was like, this is getting a little crazy. So we need to be really selective with what we expose ourselves to, and also just looking at how much time we spend. So the reason why these things exist is because they make money. You wouldn't be seeing the things you're seeing if they didn't ultimately make money for a corporation.
Hey, Curiositors, just a quick pause to show gratitude to our sponsors and give you some special deals. From time to time, I recommend other podcasts you might like, and here's one I know that you're going to love. It's the Jordan Harbinger Show. I love it because it's smart without being too highbrow and 1,000% ADD friendly. I know, you love it already. I'm a genuine true fan. When I have time to listen to podcasts just for pleasure, not, guest research, the Jordan Harbinger Show is my automatic choice. It's like when you're hungry and someone asks you what you want, and then before you even have a minute to think about it, you find yourself at Chick-fil-A because, obviously, Jordan's the Chick-fil-A of podcasts. Some of my favorites include the one with the man held hostage by Somali pirates, that's episode 115, and the pain psychologist about how pain lives in the brain, not in the body, episode 661. You can't go wrong with adding the Jordan Harbinger Show to your rotation. It's incredibly interesting, and there's never a dull show. Search for the Jordan Harbinger Show, that's HARB as in boy, I, N as in Nancy, GER, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. The Florida Panhandle isn't just the home of your favorite podcaster. That's me, by the way. Shameless, I know. But it's also a go-to spot for a lot of families on vacation. Don't plan a Pensacola trip without getting tickets to the UWF Historic Trust. It's good for a whole week, and it's a great indoor activity option. You'll recognize Trader John's, where I record the show, in the Pensacola Museum of History. Get your tickets in person so you can show the agent one of my emails and get $2 off an adult ticket. HistoricPensacola.org. Now back to the show. Remember to stay to the end where I give you a sneak peek of next week's episode. If you were to summarize the antidote to narcissism, would it be empathy or is it something else, do you think?
Well, an antidote, I would look at it more as how do you operate around someone that's like this? First, you limit your contact. That's not always possible, especially if you co-parent with someone. But the more you're around this person, the more they kind of suck you into their dysfunction. So part of it is knowing what your rights are in a relationship with someone or knowing what your rights are in general. There's a really good book called Your Perfect Right by Alberti. I think it's Albertti. And I really like it because you can open it to any point in the book and you'll read about what your rights are. You have the right to say no at any time. You have the right to change your mind at any time. You have the right to do less than what's humanly possible. There are a lot of great rights that we can educate ourselves on, that we have the right to be treated fairly. We have the right to be treated with kindness. And I think that learning more about what we deserve in life is really important. And also, again, taking a look at doing a little inventory and saying, being around this person, how does it make me feel? Does it give me energy or does it drain it? And then what are the ways that I can rectify that? Do I limit my time with them? Do I go no contact? Do I need to gray rock it when I'm around them? And what I mean by gray rock is the gray rock strategy is that when you're around somebody that is narcissistic, otherwise toxic, you react to them with just boringness and just no reaction. So let's say you're at a family dinner and your aunt's starting to act up and you're her target and she starts saying some stuff. You just go, that's interesting. Or, maybe, and then you exit. The gray rock strategy is not meant to be used long-term. It's for short-term getting out of the situation. So if you're living with somebody and you're trying to gray rock things all the time, it can be detrimental to you because you are shoving down your feelings. So again, this is meant to be kind of a stopgap measure until you can get away from that person. And again, it's not always easy because if you co-parent with somebody, you can go low contact, but you can't necessarily go no contact.
When you talk about energy gained or energy lost, that is a topic that we revisit on this show from time to time because I am an introvert. I get my energy from being alone, and I lose energy from being in large crowds. But when I'm around individual people, there is a gain loss to be deciphered also. And I've heard other, human behavior people talk about this and how it is a good measure of not just chemistry, but also what you're talking about. Like, is this a reciprocal relationship? And I'll tell you that there are very few people in this town, at least, I can't say in the world, but in this town, that I leave that conversation going, yes, that was a reciprocal conversation. Most of the time, it is one way.
Well, maybe we need to think about it globally.
Yeah, so talk about that because you have a bigger sample size than Pensacola, Florida.
And being a Floridian, I know about Pensacola. One of the things to look at is that, this is different than I'm an introvert and get peopled out. That's what I call it. Because I'm kind of right in that line of extrovert and introvert. So I will get peopled out. I will need to be by myself, then regroup. This is different than that. This is when you're around someone and you immediately have that inner gut feeling of ick. And I don't mean like the whole ick thing, which gets in a whole other bunch of narcissism we can talk about, but you just feel like I leave this feeling just drained. It's a different, and I can't describe to you how that feels, but it's a different feeling than I'm just kind of overwhelmed about people. This specific person makes me feel bad about myself, makes me feel bad about my life situation. And you could argue, well, somebody doesn't make you feel that way, but when you're around somebody that just is an energy vampire.
So it has nothing to do with lack of reciprocity conversationally. So if you're with someone and all they do is talk about them, is that on that narcissism spectrum?
I mean, that could be something that, being around somebody like that drains you. So we're not going to do that as much. And you try to steer the conversation and they keep going back to themselves. Yeah, that's an issue.
So you don't feel like that's on the rise? Because that's like my only gentle pushback to your perspective that it's not.
Sure. Oh, it's not even a pushback. I think that part of it has been, we've been through a pandemic. And I think that also we didn't stretch our social muscles for a really long time. So some of us were kind of like golden retrievers and we were able to socialize again, right? So sometimes I think that it's a matter of sometimes we don't always have the best social skills. I mean, like with ADHD, for instance, another one of my specializations, you feel like you weren't in line when the social skills manuals were handed out. So this is different than someone maybe not having the best social skills or not knowing how to do reciprocity. This is someone that uses power and control even in a short conversation with you. Uses backhanded compliments, or what I call a complisult. They'll say, oh, what a nice dress, if only they had it in your size. That kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about someone that maybe brings up inappropriate topics, talks about how much money they make, what kind of car they drive, unless you're interested in cars, and that's a conversation. But you kind of know it when you see it, that this is someone that is completely self-absorbed and doesn't really care about what your reaction is. And if you're ever around somebody that you just don't want to engage in, we have the right to not engage with them. And you just say, hey, so I'm going to move along and, I'm going to meet some new people. So I'll talk to you later. I'm thinking like a cocktail party situation.
You can use the Southern phrase we use in the South, because I know we're both in Florida, but I live like in the South.
You live in the South, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We say, well, I'll leave you to it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I know that phrase. Yeah. I lived in Gainesville. Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, I'll leave you to it.
So it's something that I think it's different than being around somebody that's being quote unquote boorish. I think when you see it, when you're around someone that just confuses you and makes you feel less than, I think that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, that is really helpful because I was kind of lumping it all together, and that helps me to separate the two things. I also wanted to ask you about narcissism as it relates to ego, because I've heard it said that ego it can be helpful. Like, we need ego to move us forward. It gives us drive. Like someone said, well, Meredith, you wouldn't have ego if you couldn't do the podcast if you didn't have some ego. And I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. Maybe there's some sort of evolutionary benefit there to having ego. So what would be the difference then between being egocentric and narcissistic? And is any amount of it helpful?
So I think that first we need to look at what the definition of ego is, because there's the general population definition of ego and then the psychological. Like if you want to get into Freud would say, like, your ego's always there. Like that's you can't toss your ego aside. But when we look at general population ego, I think that it's interpreted as being kind of full of yourself. And I think that one of the things I run into when someone is in contact with a narcissist is that narcissist tells them that you're so egotistical that any self-care is seen as a threat and any self-care is seen as a luxury, not a need. And so we have to be really careful about that with ego, is that from a psychological standpoint, ego is just part of us, and that's not something we can just shed. But I think we're talking about egotistical behavior, and that's a little bit different. I think it's important more to look at, again, how does this impact you rather than putting a name on it? Do you feel less than around this person? Do you feel like you are being taken advantage of? Do you feel like, again, the social reciprocity isn't there? And you've talked to the person and they just don't know what you're talking about, or they never apologize for behavior that hurts you. So I think we need to look at overall, again, flipping it back on us, how does it impact us?
So when we think about how to prevent narcissistic behavior within ourselves, because we've talked a lot about like that social element of interacting with narcissists, what to do, what not to do in real life, in digital life. But when we want to improve it within ourselves and make sure that we are not behaving in that way, what's the antidote for that behavior within ourselves?
One of the questions we can ask ourselves is, am I acting with empathy? Including, first of all, empathy towards myself. And that means, am I being treated by this person, or am I treating myself as if I was my own best friend? So ask that of yourself. If I was my own best friend, how would I treat myself? Let's look at our self-talk. Are we being kind to ourselves? I think that's number one. That's not narcissism. That's practicing loving kindness towards ourselves. And then maybe look at, how am I doing with being kind to other people? And you can be assertive with someone and tell them, hey, the way you treat me isn't okay, and still be kind. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Again, you're being kind to yourself by having boundaries. And I'll also add too, the way someone reacts to our boundary doesn't mean we didn't have a right to set that boundary. When people don't have our best interests in mind, when you set a boundary like, hey, that thing you called me, we're not going to do name calling. That's not part of this relationship. I'm not into that. And they react with anger. That tells you that that person just isn't into boundaries and doesn't really respect your autonomy and yourself. So when someone says, hey, you know what, thanks so much for telling me, I apologize. That was, first of all, they probably wouldn't call you a name anyway. But if they say, hey, I'm sorry I hurt you, here's how I'll, change that in the future, that's an actual apology, not I'm sorry I upset you, or I'm sorry you're so sensitive. That's not an actual apology. An actual apology owns the behavior, and then someone talks about how they're going to change it. So I think that when we talk with people, I think we really need to look at, are people taking responsibility for their behavior? When we bring up something to someone, are they owning up to it? Are our boundaries being respected? And again, a healthy person says, thanks so much for letting me know that. It's good to know kind of where things stand.
And I always like to, flip that on its head, because I think it's easy and, dare I say, entertaining to kind of analyze what other people are doing. Otherwise, reality shows wouldn't be a thing, right? Like I can't tell you how many women will watch reality True Housewives of wherever because they want to pretend to be a armchair psychologist about what are these
human behavior is fascinating. I mean, it really is.
It really is. But I find that there is a flaw sometimes in that habit because you don't take the time to go, okay, am I respecting other people's boundaries, to use your example?
Right. Or, when we are looking at other people or pointing fingers at other people, we really need to kind of look at, what am I not looking at myself?
Right. Right.
What's that thing about if you point your finger at somebody, you have like 4 pointing back at you or whatever. It's hard work to take a look at yourself and maybe even do therapy and look at those parts of yourself. But I think that informs us about who we are. And I think it can really help us develop our own boundaries. Everybody's boundaries can be a little bit different based on their life experience. So, it's hard doing introspective work, but so worth it.
It is. Thank you so much for this conversation. This has been really an interesting take on narcissism. I love that we kind of were able to weave in all the different aspects of modern life and narcissism as we know it. Can you tell people where they can find your books and your podcast? I think that this is just the tip of the iceberg of interest for my audience in this topic, and I'd love for them to go your direction.
Sure. My website's stephaniesarkis.com. It's Sarkis. And also my books are available on there, on Amazon and independent booksellers. Also, the podcast is Talking Brains, and you can find that on the website. And there's also a drop-down menu on the website of books that are recommended about gaslighting and ADHD, anxiety, other topics as well.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. Anytime.
Thanks for listening. This was an episode that includes some feedback that you gave me. That is, if you're in my private Facebook group. Fear not, if you're not in there, you're officially invited. I do post things in there that I don't post anywhere else, and I do occasional giveaways. Search MFR Curious Insiders on Facebook or click the link in the episode description. I hope to see you in there. If you liked this episode, you'll also like the one I did with a cultural anthropologist questioning American individualism. You probably heard me reference this episode in my conversation with Dr. Sarkis. That episode is episode 260. Stay tuned next week for my conversation with a Pensacola, Florida fitness trainer and registered nurse who got fit on nothing but fast food. Until then, keep it curious.